Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You're all very welcome back to this latest Knowledge Hub session at the Summit of the Americas. Now, in this session, we're going to focus on the business of airport concessions in North America, what the challenges are today, what the recovery trajectory might look like with some domestic travel returning, but international still quite a long way off, and how all of this is impacting concessionaires of varying sizes in the market. Now, we're grateful for the support of the Airport Restaurant and Retail Association, led by Executive Director Rob Wigington, and of course his board members for their support in putting this panel together. Really distinguished panel representing a cross section of the industry today. So I'm delighted to be joined by SSP America Executive Vice President Pat Murray, Bird Retail Group President and CEO Judy Bird, Hudson Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer Brian Quinn, and Arias USA CEO Carlos Bernal. You're all very welcome, everybody. Can I just begin with a snapshot of where you each stand today in your businesses, what the continuing impact of the crisis is, and on you, on your business and your people a year into this? Can I start with you, Pat?
Oh, sure. Thanks very much, Dermot, and appreciate you having us all on today. I know when this all started, we had hoped this would be something that might last a few weeks or a month or, worst case, 2 months. Now we're 13 months into this, and, it's just incredibly challenging time. So, sales at one point basically fell to just a couple of individual percentages of what we had in 2019. The employee base in the United States got down to just a few hundred folks, very, very difficult times. And of course, as this has stretched itself out, it's become more and more of a drain. I think as we look to today, certainly we're fortunate here in the United States. The vaccines have had a profound effect, and they're taking hold in terms of the population that's been vaccinated. So that's a big help. Domestic travel has certainly increased a whole lot, but the system itself is still incredibly fragile. There's a lot of components on what steal everybody's thunder. They can all relate individual parts of it. Perhaps the most challenging piece, though, today is just the unknown of not knowing what's going to happen tomorrow. We used to be in a business that all of the particular analytics we used were annual results. And now we're talking about days or parts of days in terms of how we look at our business. And it's just going to be fragile for a period of time moving forward. I think today, in terms of the word survival and revival, that's a commonly used term on cross sections of lots of business channels. I don't think we can really start the revival process until we get our noses above the water and can make all the businesses profitable. That's what I'd say. And today, that's still a pretty murky front. So
Yeah.
very challenging days, but I'll leave some other comments to my colleagues.
And just briefly, Pat, from the SSP point of view, where are you at in terms of level of openings as we enter Q2 this year?
Yeah, so we're probably about a third, 40%. And again, it's changing all the time. Dermot, there's a lot of factors in U.S. aviation that, because of the domestic base, is a little bit different. I'll just reference a few of them. Big city populations that are wide varieties. The northeastern corridor is still very, very low. The Bay Area, San Francisco, still very low in terms of 2019 counts. You have population in Florida, part of the Southwest, some of the Mountain West, but it's shifted a lot. And then the time of the day has shifted a lot. So the amount of traffic that's flying after 4 o'clock in the afternoon has changed a lot. Where the connections are changing a lot. So that's created a lot of turbulence. Trying to figure out what to open doesn't necessarily have the relevance to what was open, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'll actually come back to that and the rhythm of reopening and the decision making that goes into that perhaps in a moment when we get the snapshot. Carlos, maybe just from your point of view, where do you sit with Arias in terms of the impact overall and then where you stand today?
Well, Dermot, not too dissimilar from Pat. I think we're, probably right alongside of him. A lot of what he's seeing, right from the very beginning, into March, April, we were down, 96% to pre-COVID levels. very quickly, shut things down, furloughed, laid off our team, probably a couple hundred people, same set of numbers as well. And really, we didn't know what we didn't know. And I think we were all trying to figure out at the time. And, first and foremost, the most important thing for us is we were kind of contemplating everything is just kind of the safety of, of our team and what we need to do, and trying to get our arms wrapped around what was, probably reading and listening to everything else that everybody else was reading and listening to in terms of what were the right protocols, what to do, and just waiting for some guidance. And so, yeah, very similar to, to SSP's experience in terms of what they were saying. Fast forward, I guess, a little bit to today. Again, still, the safety of our team and our customers, is kind of primary focus for us. Is we're looking to open things up, which we are. We're seeing a bit of a lift out there. Fortunately, here in the States, anyway, domestically, on the leisure side, more than anything else. My apologies.
You can take it. It might be a customer.
I think it's my mother calling, but
Perils of Zoom calls.
Yeah, Mom, I can't talk to you right at the moment. I'm a little busy.
Oh no, talk to her. She's far more important than we are.
So we saw the same things. Now we're starting to open up some stores. We're probably right along where Pat is as well. Probably a third opened. We're probably around 65% rough, give or take, a few points either way in terms of kind of our revenue compared to pre-COVID levels. So, we brought back about the same number. About a third of our folks are back, and so we're probably tagging along right next to Pat. Cautiously optimistic, in terms of what we're seeing. Certainly, we read everything everybody else reads. The airlines are adding more aircraft, more flights, and all those things. But it's still, again, to Pat's point, it's a little bumpy. Some airports better than others, and so that's the news here on our side.
Yeah, Judy, just to come to you, generally a smaller player in the business overall. Maybe you can just quantify the impact on your business over the past year, and I suppose also where your priorities are today versus where they were 12 months ago as a management team.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to join today. For me, I'm one of some 3,500 small business operators, ACDBE operators that are involved in this business. It's a business that is very intertwined when it comes to the larger firms and small firms. I'm a joint venture partner with a couple of folks on this screen. And I would say that our futures are very much intertwined as we confront this challenge. It's all about, for a small operator like me, it's all about, the amount of risk that we've taken. We all entered this market with great optimism as we saw, employments, continuing to climb and programs. My prior life, I was actually a consultant to many airports in this industry. And I know that these programs were planned for, anticipating, that level of, very robust growth. All of a sudden we are hit with, this type of catastrophe. And I would say that the most challenging thing for me is, just as I think Pat and Carlos have highlighted, it's really the uncertainty, the inability to plan, the inability to, there's no, growth strategy, as it were, that you can put in place in this type of an environment. For small operators, my company and many, many others, we are just simply trying to survive it through, managing, our debt service, hopefully, holding off, capital calls where we can, and really trying to interface as much as we can, both with our partners and airports, and, to get everyone on the same page. I could go on, but I'm going to pause there because I know we've got a lot of questions. But that's where I sit today.
Yeah, and briefly, Brian, from your point of view on the Hudson picture as it stands today.
As it stands today, we had a plan right from the start, and I guess after the initial shock of our 95% of our business disappearing, we concentrated on a few new metrics that we had never thought about before. But TSA throughput wasn't even in our vocabulary before that, and now it's the first thing I look at in the morning is what that throughput was. What we tried to do is we knew that as soon as we had gotten to the rock bottom, we had to figure out how we were going to build back. And our plan was to keep our business in line with the TSA throughput, trying to manage a certain expense level at that same time, but continue a reopening goal. And that reopening goal at one point was about 5% of stores every week. And when that sort of got out of line with what the demands were, we backed down a little bit. And then in most recent months have had to accelerate that. So, it was really an interesting barometer. It was the throughput, and we were always really close to being on it. So I think our opening was very tactfully thought through and executed quite well. We're running at about we're very close to 70% of our locations open now. Obviously, the concentration was the travel convenience and being the ones that most exposed early and later on the balance. But the other thing that we didn't, the people that know me well hear this story all the time, but I really think it's very significant for the times. I'm an old retail historian, so I'm going to date myself by a couple of things, but during the Great Depression in the years up through World War II, there was a retailer that dominated the retail landscape in the U.S., and that was Montgomery Ward. And unless you're pretty close to my age, you don't even know who they are today. But during the Great Depression, Montgomery Ward took this approach that they were going to stop spending money, hoard everything. They were worried about not only that depression, but the second wave of depression once the war had ended, and they just stood absolutely still. On the other hand, then there was Sears, and Sears Roebuck said, post-war, there's going to be pent-up demand, which we hear now in the air travel industry as well. We're going to start building stores, we're going to innovate, and Montgomery Ward disappeared from the retail landscape, and Sears dominated it for decades after that. So what we did was we looked at what our next approach was going to be. So we really spent this time not building back our old business, but really planning for the future at the same time.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, that how you rebuild and how you consider rebuilding. Carlos, maybe just turn to you, what recovery and revival looks like to you today, and what in particular is dictating the reopenings for you. For example, this week we've spoken already to Sean Donoghue at DFW Airport and Roel Hunink at JFK T4 about how they see the reopening phase. And obviously as airports, they want every store open as soon as possible if they can for the consumer experience, but that doesn't necessarily chime with your target of doing that profitably. So perhaps just what are your thoughts on how that reopening phase can and should go forward?
Yeah, and that's probably the most challenging thing that we're dealing with today is, although we're cautiously optimistic that we're heading in the right direction. We've been very fortunate here in the U.S. that the vaccination program's been very well administered, and 3 million vaccines or shots in the arms, of whatever you want to call it, are happening every day. And so I think we're heading in the right direction as far as that goes. And I think Pat might have touched on it a little bit. There is a pent-up demand here where we're seeing leisure travel starting to pick up. And so in turn, the TSA numbers, to Brian's point, I think we had on Sunday or Monday, 1.5 million over. Actually, it was like 3 days over the last Easter weekend, about 1.5 million for 3 days out of the 4 days. So things are picking up. So now the challenge, to your point, Dermot, is how do you do it? How do you do it smartly? And that is a bit of a challenge, because obviously we're in the business of driving revenue and taking care of our guests, and that's what we do for a living, and that's why we're in this business. But then to do it smartly, I mean, that's really kind of your question, and do it to meet all the stakeholders in the airport, our clients, and as well as our company. So it's very much a collaborative effort between us and our airport partners, working together and working with the airlines in terms of having a better understanding in terms of what's happening with their employments and schedules and things like that. I will tell you, there is no playbook. I wish I could tell you, hey, we've got this thing wired and figured out. That is far from the case. I mean, we look at it every single day. We work on it every single day. We look at it every single week. And I think Judy, kind of alluded to that. It's just a collaborative effort with our partners and seeing what is the right thing, because their balance is not just Arias. They're balancing SSP, HMS Hose, Hudson, whatever. So they're looking at a much broader, lens than we are. And at the same time, we want to open up smart. We don't want to open and then not have any revenues and be in a worse position. So it's collaboration, it's information, it's timing, and trying to get that all in the pot, mix it together, and come out with the right stew at the end of the day, I guess, is what we're doing. So.
Yeah. And Judy, I guess there's a similar picture for you. What are your thoughts on how you drive the reopenings and thinking in terms of profitability of the stores going forward? It's a big challenge. And I guess the other thing also is, what concerns have you for other smaller players that maybe some just simply won't be able to reopen after this phase?
Well, you're exactly right. And many won't be able to reopen after this phase. I think that just if I could just back up just a bit, just to the subject of this particular panel about, what is really needed here is some consensus, I think, in our industry about what recovery means. How do you define recovery? I think that, and this I think applies to, equally to small operators, to all of us, is really there's a misnomer out there that says, okay, once we hit those 2019 numbers, we're back. We're far from back at that point. That's perhaps, the beginning of the conversation of recovery. And we are, collectively, as operators, large and small, dealing with, we've lost, massive numbers of employees. We've got, as I alluded to earlier, formal, debt that's outstanding. We've got deferred rent that's backed up. And we've got new accumulated debt that has been taken on just to, weather this storm over this last year. So I think that, what we're really facing is a challenge for the industry to come together, all the stakeholders, the airports, the airlines with us, to really, take a realistic and constructive look at this problem, given the facts, given the real facts of the case. And that's really where we are. So, in answer to your question really briefly, when we talk about reopening, as we addressed, I think Ara addressed in one of our early facing facts papers that we put out, we talked about reopening smartly. And what does that mean? It's not tied, shouldn't be tied to the calendar as much as it should be tied to, what are the real traffic numbers that are coming back? How do we look at this by zone? Where are those, with airline consolidations, where are those passengers boarding? All of these things need to be taken into account. And, my concern about this is no different than anybody else as a small operator, really no different than anybody else, on this panel, because as I said, our futures are pretty linked in that regard.
Yeah, for sure. And Pat, just that picture around profitability and reopening, but also that bigger picture about for the industry as a whole, there's some challenges that, getting back to 2019, as Judy said, isn't necessarily that's survival, but it's certainly not revival. And what does I guess, for you and SSP, um, revival look like and recovery look like? Because I guess it's not going to look like 2019 or any time in the past.
Dermot, thank you. And there are, Judy started on the path of some of this. It's a broad conversation to discuss in a couple of minutes, but there are lots of parts of aviation in the U.S. in particular, how an airport is sustainable. What's the impact on the airline? What's the impact to the airline of no business passengers and no international traffic? Can they actually survive the big four? But maybe to draw a picture that everybody who flies, who's listening right now, gets. When you're first boarding on a plane and they say, hey, everyone buckle their seats, and then you have the flight attendant at the front of the plane, the flight attendant then goes through what happens when a plane is in distress and the oxygen masks drop. When the oxygen masks drop, then they say, if you have a small child with you, put the oxygen mask on the child first before you help yourself. And I think that draws on the analogy of where we are. Our business grew in a path that was able to provide significant service to traveling passengers, but also be profitable. In that mix, Brian certainly has some on the retail side. We have lots of lost leaders in that business, but today our company is still in the red every single day, just like an airline. We're losing money every single day, generally not because of rent. It's generally because of what are the operating metrics of the business, Dermot. So it becomes really important to try to understand one another's position, the airport and the airline. The airlines need us to serve people, to make the consumer experience in airports really good. I'm betting I'm one of the people who's probably flown the most over the last 12 months, perhaps 100 flights. If you fly a US plane today, I've also been vaccinated for some time, but if you fly a US flight today, no carrier is giving you a cup of coffee, as an example. So they're in the same boat we are. They're super challenged by the entire experience. We have to go easy. We have to find a way to provide enough service that passengers are getting what they want. It's not helpful for us to not provide things. It also, though, puts us one step closer to real disaster if we just press open stores that can't produce enough to be profitable. So there's a real balancing act. I just closed by saying it's going to take an awful lot of communication. Panels like this are very helpful, but on a minute level in every airport, how do we work together to find that treacherous balancing act to getting enough service when people are there, but perhaps maybe not, we used to just be open all the time, and we're probably not going to be able to return to that for some time.
Yeah, and I suppose that's a segue really into what the future of those relationships will look like. It's not all about rent, and you rightly say that. And certainly for now, it's not, because many of them have been waived. But beyond where we are now, is there a requirement that we really rethink the business model? Even this week, talking to both airports and retailers, the reality of minimum annual guarantee based contracts look to have very little place in an uncertain world, but somebody's got to also take that step. Are you having, Carlos, those conversations already with your airports, or do you think that a rethink is needed in that regard, and what perhaps might alternative scenarios look like?
Well, most of the conversations, quite frankly, Dermot, are about today and survival, and keeping the conversations open as the topics we were just talking about. This isn't going to flip overnight, and so we still need the help of MAG waivers and things like that. And to Pat and Judy, we need to think through kind of our opening and how do we do that smartly for all the stakeholders involved. So today is a different story, I think, in the future, whenever that may be, and we're not sure when exactly when that is. But I do think that the business model needs to change, or at least the financial economic model needs to change. And I think in history, anytime there's been a blip in whether it's September 11th or a recession or whatever, whatever that situation may be, we find ourselves in this position that we're all struggling. So it's got to be something that's more sustainable. That's that the risk, the risk reward is kind of shared more in a more balanced approach. I personally don't think that that's MAG the way it's structured today. Maybe it's a I'll leave it to some of the other folks on the panel to kind of talk a little bit more about it, but I certainly don't think it's the fixed mag that we have today. Whether it's a per passenger, whether it's a variable rent model, a hybrid of the two, I think those are discussions that we need to begin to have, and we need to begin to have it as an industry and with all the stakeholders involved in the industry. That's my 2 cents. And but that today we're still we still have a problem. We're losing money every day, just as Pat is. We're going to lose money this fiscal year. We hope next year is better, but we're definitely going to lose money this fiscal year. So we're still very much in survival mode. And I don't know how many companies, would tell you that they're not, but I can only speak for Arias USA, and we're still trying to make it work today. So.
Yeah, Judy, that clearly is getting that bridge to tomorrow. That's the issue, isn't it? But I suppose, are you thinking already about what tomorrow might look like or should look like from the point of view of those industry partnerships?
Well, yes, we are. And I'll say that, just referring back to your comment on MAG, just to say that, the MAG issue, well, let me say it a different way. COVID just ripped the Band-Aid off of, in my mind, an existing problem. I mean, this is not, the MAG issue was there. It just was, COVID revealed it. And I think that what we're doing right now, unfortunately, as an industry, is kind of gravitating and holding on to that, that model, if you will, just because there's an absence of anything else. And this is why I'm saying that we, as an industry, and I think Carlos, everybody's alluding to this, I'm sure that you've heard this from several of your other panels, that we need to get creative and we need to start thinking outside of the box about a business model that really speaks to the moment that we're in. I'm going to be, for my own company, and I'm sure larger companies as well, very, very cautious about looking at any kind of a new deal. As long as I would say the risk structure remains as it is. And it's not just that, fear of another pandemic should we, emerge from this one, but, there are other challenges, airlines going under or things just shifting within airline gate assignments shifting, within a terminal brings you, exposes you to, a lot of risk just on that alone. So I think that these are issues that, to be really honest, the industry should have been addressing well before now. And now we're just, we're forced to do it.
Yeah. Brian, I mean, it's interesting, I suppose, you hear about what the future of MAG might or might not be. And I know, we've spoken to Roger and Julian as well in the past about what their views are on that. But again, there's always somebody out there who's willing to pay. And I guess once we're still in that scenario and the airports look for it in that way, then it's difficult to get around in many ways, isn't it?
Yeah. I think we've taken an approach that we'll worry about the things that we can control and try to fix the things that we had the ability to control. So, our approach to 2021 was again, it was the planning in 2020. One of the things that we did was we sped up the upgrades to our ERP and POS system. We gave ourselves really the backbone for the ability to reconnect with the post-pandemic customer through digital innovation. So the things that we bring to the table this year, we're bringing Hudson Nonstop, which is the use of Amazon's just walk out technology for us. Automated retail, we've just launched. We've launched self-checkout and mobile checkout. We're in the process of testing a mobile smartphone-based scan and pay system. We'll introduce the Hudson Blue app at a point in 2021. Which really gives us an additional platform for the mobile phone scan and pay, but it also gives us a platform into the e-commerce business as well, which our parent is already doing a considerable amount of. we didn't look at any of these tools as what they sound like. They sound like labor replacement tools, but they weren't that for us. They're going to allow us to take our transaction-based sales force that was there, and we're going to turn them into a customer-facing sales force. That it's going to be people that are on the floor that are going to be able to talk about products and the upgrades that we made, and we really raised the quality level. And what we found in working with our grad partners is that they're still very bullish on this industry and realize there has to be some modification to the model to get us there. We think we've done all of those things. So in terms of what happens in the future with the industry, yes, I agree with my colleagues that some change to the model has to happen. I think to work through the total elimination of MAG is a very difficult and uphill battle. But I think that the hybrid model that MAG is there when you deliver to me what we all agreed upon earlier. This was your employment level. This is what I agreed to pay based on those conditions. And when those conditions change, I think we need some triggers to protect the concessionaires.
Yeah, well, you touched on some of the innovation side, and I kind of wanted to address that as well in terms of who the new consumer is going to be, and what do they look like, and how are you trying to engage with them? How do they want to transact, consume, and how you're adapting to that new reality, Pat? From an SSP point of view, how does that look? Does the new consumer look in this early stage of recovery as a different animal? And does it mean, again, early days, new formats, new categories, new thinking about how you communicate with them?
Yeah, good question, Dermot, right? I think the prognosticators could probably give us a lot of information. I think Carlos referenced it earlier. Today, I think the US, I'll say the American market economy, has an element of irrational exuberance, right? So the passenger that's in the air today doesn't necessarily mirror the passenger that we had 14 months ago, but it also may not be the passenger that's in the air come September either. So the ultra low cost carriers throughout the country are on a run. They've done incredibly well. People who can travel are traveling, particularly the way that vaccines were provided around the country. The older population was vaccinated first. Many of those people then took that as an opportunity to go and do things that they hadn't done previously, or just to travel and see family and friends. That demand may look completely different come 6 months from now. So I think that the aggregate of who the consumer is absolutely going to keep changing. As I noted earlier, one of the challenges is the unknown of just what we don't know and how soon that comes. I do think that the digital age, if you will, is going to have an impact on it. It's something that sort of came on to us fast, whether it was getting a menu on your phone or actually ordering off of your phone or ordering from a kiosk. Those things became very friendly experiences when you were trying to keep 6 feet apart from people. Some of that certainly is going to stay. And, as Brian said, it's going to give you more access points to people. It's going to make it easier, make the transactions faster to accomplish. I think it's still yet a really big unknown for us as to where the whole business goes overall. And maybe one consideration for this would be to, realize for all the restaurant and retail operators, duty free as well, we have fixed assets. Our assets go into a particular spot, and that's a real challenge. You can't just move the restaurant from one part of the building to the next or to another airport. So there's not going to be a lot of change going on right now. It's more of a how do we adapt? Maybe that's a better word to the times. A lot of restaurants today, we have people seating outside what have been the traditional lease lines. Of course, the concourses aren't as busy, so there's more room out there, but that's how we create the 6 feet of separation. So lots of things there to chew on, and I'm sure we'll have lots of conferences in the future to contemplate what's the future passenger look like.
Yeah, for sure. Carlos, how does it look to you? I mean, we certainly heard a lot this week about, in the early phase, higher than average, previously average spending across retail and some F&B. And again, I think probably that's a byproduct of that exuberance that we were talking about. What are you sensing about the consumer appetite to shop and dine again, and how do you think that might evolve?
No, I think what we're seeing as a company, I mean, clearly our transaction counts are, significantly down, but the average spend is up, somewhere, 3 to 5% up to pre-COVID, and that's without a price increase, really. So we're seeing some positive lift on the amount of money that the customer is willing to spend. So which is good. Whether that's a function of we're doing a great job, I like to think so, or that there's not as many stores open as you would typically be open. So maybe it's a combination of a couple different things. We're doing the same things from your point on digital, to a degree to what Pat and Brian are doing. QR codes, kiosks, and working on mobile. And I think for us, it's not an or, it's an and. A little bit to what Brian was saying is, we're looking at, we need the digital, but I think when consumers start to fly or customers start to fly, flying's an adventure, and whether it's a business trip or a leisure trip or what have you, you want a level of service that's part of it as well, and you want some of that interaction. So. I don't think it should go all the way to one side. It's all digital, and that's the way. That's the fix. I think it's got to be a happy medium between the two. Some digital, some frictionless, as we like to call it, just to minimize the handling of money, if you will, which we don't accept. We just take credit cards where So, and then you have to have the customer service side of it as well, because people do want to sit down. They do want to sit down and have a meal. They do want to sit at a bar and have a conversation with the bartender and the person. Maybe they're a couple chairs removed now from when they used to be, because of social distance, but people still want that interaction with other folks. So we think it's both.
Yeah, we had a session earlier in the week about blending humanization and digitalization in the industry going forward. And I think even the companies that represented, I suppose, the digital side of things, and that's what they do day to day, certainly grasped and not only understood, but wanted and encouraged the fact that we should have, the human touch here, because actually, it's what can Amazon or Alibaba not do? And that's part of what we as an industry can deliver. Perhaps Judy, just on that as well, in terms of, you planning or sensing for a different type of consumer coming into your environments going forward, and I suppose how their expectations might change around the offer, the environment, and willingness to engage and transact?
Well, to be perfectly honest with you, I think, as I've been thinking a lot about this, and I think it's too soon to tell. I think that we have, experienced, a traumatic event and in our lives. And I think that we will see how people process this in the way that they move about their lives and how they shop and how they dine. And while I do feel that technology is going to, as everyone on this call has said, and you've just alluded to, that technology is going to play a bigger part. I think that folks are, vaccines are going to be ever mindful of safety and security. And so, how does that play out in terms of how products are sold and how restaurants are run and so forth in airports? Big question. What does that consumer look like? We're waiting to see. Everybody's, holding on to their, with bated breath to see what happens with, does the business traffic come back? That's huge issue. Does the business traveler come back after, a year to going on to a year and a half of being able to realize productivity from home? How does corporate America respond to this? And how you've got to tie all of that together. And that's going to inform what airports do in planning these programs and in programming space and what they're offering to the public, and how does the international traffic come back, when and how that comes back. It's all going to be affected, and that's where we're all sitting really on tetherhooks right now and trying to wait and see, how does, does this store, survive, or does this concept survive? Or is it, is it going to be obsolete when we're back? And that's really, so it's not a great answer to your question to say, I don't know, but I think that it's an honest answer that we are still very much in the woods about how people will process this emotionally and how that will manifest itself in their behavior.
Yeah, no, thanks. Pat, just to turn to the issue of supports actually, and we talked a little bit about airport relationships, but also, ARA's been instrumental along with other associations in pushing for and successfully getting some level of relief from government as part of the airport's contribution overall. So where do we maybe just stand today briefly, and what are the next steps in gaining further support from the government side, and what can people do to support that, I suppose, is the key question.
Sure, thanks, Dermot. I think for most Americans, it's probably true, probably for most countries of the world, we have commentary often complaining about our governments, right? If you think about how government has handled themselves during this, especially most recently, they've been incredibly supportive of the aviation sector in the United States. And I think, throughout the legislature and the current executive understand that there's so many things that are directly tied in our economy to aviation, because in the US, this is our sort of advanced bus service. This is how people are moving around, and this is representing commerce. So there's a level of relief. Of course, we would like more. And I think from any sector, whether you're on the airport side, airline side, or like us, one of the businesses that operate in an airport, we just don't know what the future looks like. So the legs of the stool that support the overall system are both awkward and uncertain. I think if you were to poll us or many members of Congress, who, by the way, fly all the time, it's one of the great things, they get to experience us all the time. We all know it'll be back, but when will it be back? And is that 2 years from now? Is it 3 years from now? Et cetera. The relief structure that was put out there was intended to give relief for part of 2021. So that kind of puts a frame in the back of your mind of the volume of the relief that was given. And I think it's still uncertain. In the midst of this, I'd say maybe like the rest of our businesses, functionally airports also now have even more exposure to the physical assets that have to be upgraded. So the infrastructure bill is being considered by Congress today. There's an awful lot that is in that needs to be recognized in terms of how we're going to work on those projects. Infrastructure to build a U.S. airport or a terminal, is going to take you 5, 6 or more years to do. So they got to think that far in advance. So there's a lot of components of this. I think generally, though, we feel as though we've gotten a good level of support and recognition for how important a function we are in the economy. And probably like everybody else in the world, we got to walk gingerly forward and fragilely to make sure that we keep this thing on the rails, if you will. But very optimistic about how the response has been.
Good. Just a brief question to each of you, both personal and professional one. How tough has it been to be a business leader through this crisis overall, and any lessons that you and your team has learned, Carlos?
Well, I joined Arias January of last year, so just at the right time for all this to have happened, and for me, I kind of feel I was destined to be here. In spite of all the tough stuff and challenges that we put our team through, and furloughs and layoffs, and working with a much smaller team that we have in the past, every person has just stepped up in such a big way just to take on more work longer hours, do whatever they needed to do, keep the company moving forward. And now that we've started to recall some people back, And you would think, and some people have been laid off for a year, so we haven't seen them. And they're just starting to come back, and you think there'd be a level of animosity. None whatsoever. Just grateful that we called them back and happy that we're still here and working. And so I think that's kind of some bad news, but some really, really good stuff that came out of it. I think the biggest thing for us is been communication, and being completely transparent and honest with what we're dealing with, and sharing our numbers with our team, our company, and letting them know the situation that we're in. And I think by doing that, created a level of trust that and that we're all in this thing together, and that there is no BS, and this is what's going on, and we're doing everything we can, and as soon as we can get back, we'll bring you back. And so I think that's been a big part. But I've been, as I guess the leader, I've just been so grateful and appreciative of what people are going through and what they're doing to keep supporting the company.
Yeah, Judy, that's a tough balance to have there. You're trying to lead through, but also the uncertainty that's around for everybody in every organization is one that you've got to try and get over people's fears in some way, or encourage them to keep going. And that's no easy task, as we've heard over the last 15 months or so from people in the industry.
Yeah, I would say fear is the right word. And, I certainly have, no question about it, great angst about what's going on and what, the future of my own company is. And although I do think that it will be back, it's just, no one wants to operate in the dark. And it's just it's the common theme here through this conversation, and many of them is the uncertainty. What has really energized me, and Carlos alluded to it, is to see how this industry of restaurant and retail operators have come together around issues that are just common to all of us, and around our own survival, and and frankly having the opportunity to participate in ARA. It's a new organization which wasn't at all formed to deal with a catastrophe of this magnitude, but to be able to dig in. And I don't know what my frame of mind would be, frankly, if I were just, kind of sitting on the sidelines, praying for the business to come back. But this has given me an opportunity to lean in and try to find solutions. And that's, that has been really the saving grace for me, is that, we're working every single day, and, really trying to think outside of the box about, how to bring our industry back. So that's been great, that part of it.
Yeah, and Brian, we've talked to a lot of people, and one of the themes that comes up is just that issue of trying to build resilience in people, and that's not an easy thing to do as a manager or director. And how are you guys at Hudson going about that? And obviously you're bringing people back now, which is encouraging, but it's been a long road to get there.
Yeah, it has been, and I guess when we talk about the first of the question of leadership, this was an incredible weight on all of us that had to be in the decision-making roles early on in the pandemic. But being able to re-employ such a significant part of our workforce now and get them back, and Carlos, to your point, they've come back, no animosity whatsoever, just really happy to re-engage. But none of this would have been possible without the work that our airport partners did, the industry coming together, the whole ecosystem really working well. I mean, for me, it was our airport partners were absolutely tremendous. Our suppliers, they kept the flow of goods coming to us, brought us some innovative ideas, and helped us get through that. My group of ACDB partners, they were just absolutely incredible during this, understanding, pitching in, doing so much more to build the morale and keep our staffs engaged. And most importantly, it was really the heroic efforts of our frontline employees that made this all possible. They kept the lights on. They kept travelers with reliable, safe service in a time when, they found, first of all, they didn't know what to expect in getting to the airport, but they had that little oasis that sat there, which was being able to get a magazine or get a book and get a snack, a beverage, and do it in what felt like a comfortable and friendly environment. So I said, this is really what this business was about. I'm very proud of the industry for the way it came together.
Yeah. Pat, final word to you, and obviously on your, your people as well, being so key, and we've met many of them over the years at our FAB events, and on the frontline workers as well, and I guess it's kind of continuing to build that resilience in those people too is a key part of the leadership role.
Dermot, I think, I wonder how we'll talk about this period of time in 10, 15, 20 years, what it was like and what it was like personally. My parents' generation lived through and served in the Vietnam War, and the tragedy that hit the American public was hard. This period of time has been really rough in terms of personal loss. And here in the US, where airports remained open, people flew, you never thought that you were going to be taking your life in your hands going to flip cheeseburgers. But that's a real reality of what we've been through. There's a lot of people out there that, need to be recognized. The effects on people has been all over the map, whether people lost their parents or school kids that didn't go to school for a whole year. And the service business, not uncommon to have single parents, and you have kids who, don't really have anybody who's taking care of them, trying to get them to school. Well, they're at the airport just trying to keep their jobs going. So I think it's been a really tragic time. I would tell you, in our group here, we have lots of people who both contracted COVID, who got really sick, some who, his life was tragic. For me, one of my colleagues, who's well known by the panelists and others in the business, he got COVID, he got really sick, he had the respiratory challenges, and I remember it like yesterday when Paula Pakis' wife was dropping him off at the front door of the hospital, because that's all they let people do. And it seemed like something out of the dark ages in our world, that here's this guy who is widely known in our business channel. He's going in, and he was in the hospital for 2 weeks. He survived and came out and healthy. And of course, now we're making him work himself to death, but thank God. But, it really hits home, I think, Dermot, in terms of the challenges. I think everybody here has a servant's heart about hospitality. We're talking about some of the financial challenges, the emotional, physical strain's been brutal. But I think amidst all of that, with all the challenges we talked about, what hits home to me as somebody who spent my entire life in hospitality, some of your best customers come from having some kind of difficult situation at a table that you then overcome. So you misprepared somebody's food, or you made the wrong drink, or you didn't get them to the table in time. The manner in which you handled that circumstance and how you over-serviced them through that is what they remember. And often those very people become frequent guests in the future. And I think Brian touched on it, Carlos did, the industry's reaction about how to get closer, whether it was to our airport partners, to one another, to the folks who report on our industry, to consultants, and even airlines. I think that reaction is something that will make our industry a whole lot better in the future, because we're friends. And I think we've seen how people react in really difficult times. So I appreciate the way you framed up the question, and certainly for having all of us on. It's really helpful. Hopefully we get to see you sometime soon, and we get to be a little closer than 6 feet apart and share a pint of something that tastes good. How's that?
We certainly hope so as well. And I think important to salute the role of all of you at ARA and the work that you've done for the industry, alongside the associations that are co-hosts with us of this event, IAA, DFS, and Acetil in their respective regions. I think it's not only, but it's accentuated in times of crisis that the representative bodies within the industry come to the fore, and you only realize the work that they do when it comes to a deep crisis such as this. So that's appreciated. Look, I'd like to thank Judy, Brian, Carlos, and Pat for joining us here today, for their time, their thoughts, and their insights into where we're headed. I think there's going to be some hard days, some dark days ahead, but I think we're beginning to see just a little bit of light. And at this point, that's some encouragement about what's to come. We're going to pause now for our latest virtual coffee break, courtesy of our friends at Somers Coffee. And at 2:15 Eastern, so that's in just over 20 minutes, we have what should be another highlight where I'll be talking to Vancouver Airport CEO Tamara Vrooman in the latest installment of our CEO Chair sessions. We'll see you then. Thank you again to all our speakers and to all of you for tuning in.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone. Thank you.
Bonjour, hi, I'm Nisha Sadaker.
And bonjour, hi, I'm Seema Sadaker. And this is Bentley. And welcome to our Somers Coffee Break here at the Summit of the Americas.
Even though Vegas has us hot and hustling every day, we've still kept the mantra, you've always got time for Tim Hortons. Oh, and the Toronto Blue Jays and the Toronto Raptors.
After playing a round of golf and coming inside to escape the heat, make time for your furry friends and treat yourself to a Tim Hortons ice cap.
Let us show you how to enjoy your iced cappuccino, Somers style.
Get your blender ready. Put 2 cups of ice into your blender. Follow with 6 ounces of Somers coffee. Pour 14 ounces of cold brew coffee into your blender. Blend until smooth. Pour into your tumblers. Add whipped cream and fun sprinkles. Enjoy with some Tim Hortons Timbits cereal as a snack. Oh Canada, our home and native land.
Wouldn't it be amazing just to take a quick trip home?
Let's go.
That was amazing, eh?
I know, eh? Enjoy the rest of your day.
Eh?